In this class we're going to talk about research in business. Now this is one class amongst several on this topic, and it's wise for you to make sure you have seen the other classes and made notes from them, so you'll get a much more comprehensive view of the topic. However, in this class we want to look at some important issues. So let's start by looking at the desirability of research. Well, first of all, research provides an insight and information that contribute to effective decision making. The decision maker needs research to help facilitate the process of decision making. Decision making without research is taking a chance. It's risky. Now the future is unknowable. We can't tell what the future is going to be, but research can give insights, and it can also highlight all of the possibilities that perhaps the decision maker may have missed. They may have missed some of them at least. So research gives some insight into situations that could arise in the future and that perhaps the decision maker should be aware of. So research is certainly important in the context of decision making. Putting it simply, it adds to the knowledge of the decision maker. It gives the decision maker an insight, and it helps the decision maker to take into account perhaps circumstances which would have otherwise been missed. So it helps to reduce business uncertainty. Well, it takes away some of the uncertainty, that's for sure. It, as I said, it highlights circumstances and situations which perhaps may have been overlooked had the research not been undertaken. So it certainly helps to reduce it. It can never get rid of uncertainty because, as I said, the future is unknowable. The future is uncertain. We can't tell what the future will be. But research is desirable for those points. Now the managerial need for information, well, competition is a big driving force in the need for information. Companies by and large do not operate as monopolies. Many companies operate in competitive environments, not just domestically competitive, in other words, all the companies within the country competing, but there's also international competition. Products coming in from overseas. So the business person is locked into a highly competitive situation and will therefore require much information to try and survive, grow the business, make a profit, and so on. There is an increased use of data mining and data warehousing. Now these expressions should be looked up. You should try and research these yourself and get an insight into them. In fact, there is a video available on these topics, and you may consult that as well. However, data mining and data warehousing means the selection of appropriate analytical tools for researching data and the methods used in collecting the data. So data mining is extracting data from perhaps from a population, a survey method, looking at the data and trying to extract it logically and rationally, and then processing the data, and then using the data if it's deemed to be useful. There is a need to try and discover patterns and trends in the data. There are many statistical techniques that have been developed to try and help with this. Smoothing techniques and regression, and also looking at trend lines and correlation coefficients, and there are many others trying to discern what is the pattern in the data, to try and refine the data and seek out the patterns that underpin the data, and then that way if you like, generate information, because information is data that's been refined. Now, research skills. Well, to gather more information before selecting a course of action. That's the purpose, to gather information, to gather data and refine the data into information before some course of action is undertaken. And to do that, research skills are necessary. So research skills are important in order to generate the information that's required for decision making. They're also useful for high-level research studies. Some research studies are complicated and they're big. Depends on the nature of the business, depend on the nature of the industry, but some may involve a lot of investment or a lot of capital and therefore require intensive research to try and shed light on possible outcomes. And good research skills are necessary in order to conduct that. And also to understand the research design. So to understand a research design requires significant research skills. To design the research, to ensure it's logical, it's coherent, it's efficient, to ensure that it will do the job that's required of it, all requires considerable research skills. They're also needed to evaluate and resolve a current management dilemma. Sometimes the management have problems, for example, in managing scarce resources, a limited budget, a limited amount of capital available. Should the management put the capital into extra stock in the stores, or should they increase marketing expenditure, or whatever? But there is a dilemma, there is an issue. Both need to be done. The resources are not there to enable the management to do both. Now, research may indicate which one is the better option, and research skills are needed to develop perhaps a quick piece of research, a quick insight into both, and to come back with some recommendations to help management resolve the issue. Research skills are also needed to establish a career as a research specialist. Clearly it must be the case, if a person wants to be a research specialist, they must have significant research skills. But there is an ever-increasing market for researchers, quality researchers, who will undertake research in professional and formal settings and will bring back results which are reliable, subject to all of the issues about sampling and confidence intervals and the fact that we can't work out precisely what the population is and so on. Subject to all of that, there is still a need for good quality researchers. Now, different styles of research. Well, we have applied, sometimes called action research. So, for example, improved production techniques. That could be an area of investigation. It's very applied. It's trying to solve a problem. What are the improved production techniques that are necessary? Or it could be to investigate customer needs. That's an issue as well, perhaps, that needs to be investigated. We also have pure research, generalizations, that should be generalizations, and formulations. So we have knowledge for knowledge's sake, research at universities, for example, in which research is undertaken for the purpose of adding to human knowledge, putting it simply. research into history or into sociology or psychology, or research into the more obscure areas of physics, chemistry, biology, and so on. Research into astronomy. All very important subjects, but they are adding to our knowledge as a species, which is what we want. We want to know more. Now, the nature of good research, well, it makes known what was previously unknown about the business. So business research is good because it exposes areas of ignorance and turns them into areas of knowledge. Areas that were previously unknown become known. And research enables this to happen. You can also discover best practice. By research, it works out what are the best ways to manage the business. What is best practice elsewhere as well. And so it learns from others' experiences, as well as doing some research into best practice within the business itself. So overall, it can lead to a reduction of costs. And it tries to be objective. It doesn't try to put forward solutions that it's imagined, figments of the imagination. Somebody has some idea and wants to bully it through. That's not right. The research process is one of logic, thinking, rationalization, generalization. It's looking at the whole process and trying to figure out what is the data and what is the situation telling us. The researcher may be a participant in the business, maybe making observations, and from the observations designs the research report, submits it, and recommendations of the report may be implemented. These are, in a sense, logical. They're not somebody's prejudices or opinions. So it's objective. Good research should be easy to understand. Good research should be accessible. The management should be able to read it and understand it. It should be straightforward. And it should be an insight. They should be easily able to follow the argument, the logic of the case presented, and that will enable them to understand it and perhaps adopt it and act on it. It should be open and honest. It should specify the limitations of the research. It should say whatever assumptions it made or whatever the limitations were. It should indicate the limitations. There was not enough data. The research was conducted too fast. It was too quick. Whatever. State the limitations so that it's an honest piece of work. Honest and open, and the reader will understand what his limitations were, and then they can make a decision knowing the full facts. Its methodology should be unbiased. In other words, its methodology should not promote a particular agenda. The methodology should be agreed in advance, and then the data subjected to that method and analysed by that method and reported, and the limitations of the method and the limitations of the whole process openly discussed. So it should be an unbiased piece of work. Now, the role of business research, I should say, in decision making. Well, business research is important because it can help identify the problem, whatever the problem is, and there are always problems, generally speaking. Well, business research can expose the problem. It can expose the root of the problem. Sometimes we see the problem, but we're only seeing the symptoms of the problem. Business research, by taking an in-depth approach, can identify the root of the problem and try to deal with that. And when there are several problems confronting the business, it can prioritize the problems. You can look at which one to deal with first, which one's most important, which one's most pressing, and deal with that first. And look at ways of resolving the problem, because it's only when there's information about the problem available can decisions be made on how to solve the problem, how to resolve the issue. And it can also indicate the appropriate courses of action and make recommendations on how to implement the appropriate courses of action. So it's a big management tool. It facilitates management, good management. So it is important. Now, the factors affecting business research, well, the time constraint. Generally speaking, there's never enough time. It's always the case that management want the answers now. Well, research takes time. So there is an issue. Time is always a problem. The activity, research activity, can be expensive. And it may be the case that the management do not want to commit a lot of resources to this. Now, that may be a false economy. As I said earlier, the advantages of research can be quite profound and quite large. So cutting back on research may not be a good idea. The best approach here is for research to have its own budget, agreed at the start of the year, and a small, perhaps, research team, depending on the size of the business and the nature of the business, but perhaps a small research team employed to look into various issues as they crop up and make reports. The nature of the information sought. Well, sometimes information may not be as objective as we'd like to think. Sometimes we need to inquire into the attitudes of people towards a particular situation, the attitudes of the customer towards the product. Do they like the product? Do they like the innovation that's recently been put in place, or do they prefer the old product, or what do customers think? Or it could be research into the workers in the factory. Do the workers find the working conditions to be pleasant or not so pleasant? What do they like about the business? What do they dislike about it? And so on. So information sought can be complex. Attitudes are particularly difficult to assess, and the researchers would have to have some sort of background in psychology, ideally be psychology graduates. And the last point is any research must pay for itself, ideally. So the cost of the research should yield savings which exceed the cost of the research. So the benefit from the research must exceed the cost. That's the way the world is. If the cost of the research is greater than the savings it results in, then it should not have been undertaken. So the benefits of the research should be less than the savings. That's the ideal situation. So this class has looked at various topics related to business research, and as I said at the start, add these to the other videos in this area, and also look at the wider videos on research in general that are available in this module. But that's all I'm going to do at the moment on this one, so I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.